Hi, I'm Ari, I'm the Oak Witch, and in today's video I'm going to be going over charging objects and spell work, raising energy, and alternatives to visualization. So when we look at spell work and doing spells, a lot of the time in that methodology or in that structure, we are charging objects or charging spells, raising energy to power that magic so that it works our will more effectively. And in terms of powering your magic, it really does depend on the model of magic in which you ascribe to. So probably the two main ones which tends to be what people look at, specifically in witchcraft, is the energy model and the spirit model. There are more that go beyond that, which I have spoken about in my video when I went through types of magic, but the energy model and the spirit model are the ones I'll be sort of focusing on in today's video when it comes to raising energy and charging spells. The spirit model is pretty much exactly what you would expect working with spirits when we're performing our magic. So this might be looking at when we are performing a spell, and in practice this can look like forming a relationship with a particular spirit and having that bond so that when it comes to performing a spell, you can ask or petition the spirit to perform a specific action for you in regards to the intention behind your spell, and that will be what powers the spell itself. In these spirit relationships, it is give and take, so it will require giving offerings or performing devotional acts in the spirit's honor, for example. So it's like giving and having that reciprocal relationship. So devotion is a word people don't often love, but it is about showing your devotion to a spirit, showing that I guess you care and that you're willing to put the work in, so they will also show the same to you. It's definitely that kind of mutual relationship when it comes to spirit work, and the better relationship you have with that spirit, the closer bond that you have formed, the more likely they're probably going to do these magical actions and practices for you and work your magic. So it's definitely like a longer process when it comes to the spirit model and magical practice. But in this video I'm going to be focusing on mainly the energetic model when it comes to explaining how to charge objects and how to raise energy, because I think spirit work is its own video and I'll happily do a video on that if people want to, but I'm going to focus on the energetic model in this video. So underlying this energetic model is the notion that there is energy in all things, and energy can't be created or destroyed, but it can be manipulated, and that's what we're doing when we're performing spells. We are directing energy, manipulating it in a way, and kind of pushing it into a specific goal, into our will. And it's just about that movement of energy really. And of course when it comes to powering a spell object, and you want to power it with energy so that the magic can actually work towards something that you're intending to achieve, then it requires that build up of energy. You need to power something and it needs to come from somewhere. So that's what we're looking at when it comes to like charging objects and raising energy in a ritual, for example. And what people often jump to immediately when we're looking at charging objects is the concept of visualization. And this concept of visualization involves what people call the witch's eye, but it is this idea that, you know, you can visualize or conjure up images, scenes in your mind, in your witch's eye, and in your spell work you incorporate visualization, such as if I'm doing a job spell and I want to secure a job, the visualization may involve me kind of like filling out CVs, handing them in to a company, and the company employee like accepting me and hiring me. And that's the visualizations that I would perform in the spell because that is what I want to achieve. So it directly aligns with my goal. In a lot of maybe more new age kind of modern spirituality practices, people refer to the concept of manifestation. So it's a lot of that law of attraction type thinking where you visualize what you want and you work towards it, so eventually it will happen. And visualization is incorporated a lot in those types of spiritual practices, and it's not too dissimilar to how a lot of people kind of incorporate visualization in witchcraft and spell work. For me, I kind of see visualization as a method to charge objects, as something that, like, if I am visualizing a certain desire, something that I'm trying to achieve in the spell work, I'm focusing in on that feeling, on that specific desire, that action that I'm working towards, and I'm really like drawing in a lot of my own personal energy into that like visualization, and then I want to like basically just transfer it into obviously whatever the spell, object or ritual looks like. So it's like using that visualization to really raise your energy and like work your mind towards a specific goal. Of course, psychologically speaking, I think this can help a lot of people, and arguably a lot of people will say that it's mostly psychology, but that's really down to you. It's the idea that like you really have what you want in your mind all the time. I really want this one thing and I'm going to visualize it. I'm going to picture myself happy that I've successfully done this thing, and I'm going to maintain that image in my head throughout every action that I'm going to be doing, working towards that goal. So it's kind of almost psychologically motivating yourself to really get this action performed and to achieve this goal. So psychologically speaking, of course, that can influence your behavior, and you know what, if that's what helps you, that's what helps you. And I think that's still just as valid as like performing spells and doing all sorts of other more witchcraft and occult based actions. So ultimately, this concept of visualization is really just down to what works for you. What works for you or works for you, and that's obviously okay. But a lot of the time, people particularly what I've seen as a witchcraft creator, I've had people come to me and sort of say, well, I can't visualize. What can I do if I can't visualize? And it's that concept of like having aphantasia. So some people just aren't able to form images in their mind at all, or as easily as maybe some other people can. And if you can't visualize, that is completely okay. You can still charge objects, you can still raise energy, you could still perform spells effectively. It's just about working with the tools that you have and what works best for you. But it's about experimenting with different things, and once you find techniques that, you know, really work for you and that really suit you best, then that's where your magical practice will shine. But it's really just finding a practice that is more authentic to your capabilities. So that's what I want to run through today, just some other alternatives. Before I go into some alternatives to visualization, I wanted to give some tips for visualization, because, you know, some people may not have aphantasia but just kind of struggle with it and are struggling working on how to visualize, and I thought I would just give some tips. My first tip would be is get an object. It can be anything that you resonate with, anything that has a distinctive shape, and just take the object. It can help if you get yourself in a meditative state and you're really just feeling the object. You're feeling it and really acknowledging all the sides, the shape, the colour, maybe the patterns, its texture, its weight, if it smells, all these sorts of things, all this sensory information. Really just absorb it in and really acknowledge the object in front of you, really take it in. And what you'll want to do is you can keep it in your hand, and then you can close your eyes and try to see the image. If it helps you, literally have the image in front of you like this, like looking at it, then closing your eyes and then trying to see the image as you've literally just seen it, right? So it may just involve starting off like that, and then perhaps once you're able to do that and you've got that down, then maybe try to do that without holding it and work towards things like that. Another good tip for helping visualization is to practice meditation more. If you're someone who's maybe a bit lazy on the meditation and is struggling with visualization, I think honing in on your meditation is really good for helping your mind focus on something, helping like what they call the monkey brain, or just helping calm in your mind. If you have racing thoughts, being able to focus on a particular thing is really, really important when it comes to not only visualization but just general magical practice and all those sorts of things. So it can definitely be a useful practice to get better at. Meditation is something which is often like seen like you have to be perfect at it straight away. The very act of just being still and focusing on a particular thing, or just clearing your mind, so to speak, is meditation. You know, just the very act of trying to center oneself in your thoughts, in your spirit, is practicing meditation. You do not need to be an expert. I know a lot of people get really put off because they sit down, they try to meditate and their mind's racing and stuff, and they're just saying, oh, I can't do it. But the very act of you doing that is meditation. And obviously the more you do it, the better you get at it. But don't be discouraged. You know, even just practicing it is still practicing meditation. So that is something which can help your visualization, because obviously it's like training your mind to be able to just sit and be still, you know. So when it comes to that, that can help you be able to conjure those images if that's something you struggle with, because your mind's always racing, so it's hard to like visualize objects. So that's a technique which can help. I think going along the same lines of meditation, I think doing guided meditations can really help. A lot of people might struggle with just being quiet and trying to meditate, but I think guided meditations as well are really good because it kind of helps you practice that concept of imagery and visualization. So guided meditations is really, really good if you want to sort of get into that habit of being in a meditative state and then also sort of conjuring images in your mind. And having someone obviously tell you what to picture can help you. So that's also something which can help in terms of practicing your visualization. So those are the tips I have for you, and just word of advice is that like it's not something which happens like overnight. I think people can get discouraged when you're looking at all these books that recommend certain exercises and talk about visualizing and charging stuff and all these sorts of magical practice, which is really fun and really exciting as a beginner. When you sit down and try to do it, you like expect it to happen like you've been doing it for years, and obviously it doesn't happen like that. It can get kind of discouraging. But please note that, you know, everyone goes at their own pace, and some of these magical techniques and these skills, they take people months or years to really get to a good level. So, you know, keep at it and go at your own pace. If it doesn't work for you, there are other options, such as ones I'm gonna go through now. So as I kind of hinted at earlier in the video, a technique you can incorporate in terms of raising energy and charging objects is maybe focusing on your emotions or your feelings as opposed to solely visualization. So if you can't visualize, then I think what you can do instead is really focus on the feeling or emotions surrounding the intention or will of what you're trying to achieve in your goal and your ritual. So for example, if I'm doing a self-love spell, instead of maybe conjuring up images of myself being happy, or I feel like myself, or I feel like I'm like hugging myself because I love myself, those sort of images that maybe people would conjure up. Instead, I might want to just get into a meditative state, which is why meditation is important, and focus on that feeling of self-love. So just happiness or warmth, trying to like feel yourself like warm, and maybe that feeling of having like a blanket wrapped around you or in front of a fire. And so those feelings, or like that feeling of success when you've achieved something like a milestone, that's self-love, self-care, and like feeling of worthiness that comes from your own achievements. Like whatever it is, whatever like that feeling comes from, hone in on that and you can direct that into your goal, into your spell. And of course, it doesn't need to just be feelings and emotions. If you're able to work more with kind of like, instead of visualizing images, if you're really talented or skilled at like being able to conjure up like noises, or for example your other senses like smell, then I still think that can actually work just as well. Like, might be slightly more difficult, but if it's something that you can do, I think that's still something which can be really useful for your spell work just as much as visualization and imagery can. It's about using all of your senses to be able to hone in on your personal energy, to raise it and then direct it into an object. So really whatever sensory information works for you. It doesn't just need to be images. So going further with sound, this is something I kind of spoke about in my music and witchcraft video. And if you have like a particular affinity with music or certain songs, then I think it can be such a good way for raising energy and being able to like really connect to a song to raise their energy and to obviously then push that into your spell work. Music can be such a great tool for this. A tip I gave in that video I did was like creating a raising energy playlist. And this is something which I do quite a lot. If I'm at my altar, I'll literally on Spotify put on my raising energy playlist, and it really gets me in that like witchy mood. And it might seem a bit silly, but you know what? It really works. Getting you into that like witchy vibe sounds very trivial, but it's not, because it helps. It really does. And you know, I think that whole aesthetic of practicing witchcraft can really help people practice their magic more efficiently, because it gets you in that mood, it gets you in that zone. And whatever gets you in that zone, for example with meditation, if putting on a robe, if sitting down in a lotus position helps you meditate, then do it. You know, if just leaning against a wall in a hoodie helps you meditate, then do it. It really doesn't matter what you do. Like with scrying, there's so many different ways to scry. If just closing your eyes and using the back of your eyelids helps you to scry, then do it. If getting a crystal ball and long drapey sleeves like this helps you get into that zone of scrying, then do it. Really doesn't matter. So really just find out what makes you tick, what helps you get in that mood. It's like figuring yourself out, figuring out your own personal power, how you work, how your body reacts to things, and your mind. So it's really just getting to know yourself and working with yourself. So I guess that's a large tip I would give. And music can play a really big part of that overall atmosphere and that mood, that you're setting a tone. So music is a great tool for this. Going along the lines of music, movement can also be a really great tool for raising energy. And you see this a lot like in many different cultures when we're looking at ritual and ceremonial practices. A lot of it is movement, whether you're like holding hands and like dancing in a circle, or you know, I've done that. I've done dancing around a bonfire at pagan gatherings. A lot of it is that music, the drumming, the dancing. It really helps you raise that energy and push it towards a goal. And that's something you can do. You don't have to be in a group at a pagan gathering to do that. You can do that sitting in front of your altar at home. Get on some drumming music on Spotify or Fleetwood Mac or whatever helps you get into that groove, and just sway your body. You know, you don't have to be a good dancer. You don't have to be a good swayer. It doesn't matter if you look silly, because no one's watching you. No one's there to judge you. You're with yourself. It's about being comfortable with yourself. And when you're able to just get into that rhythm of whatever helps you raise the energy. It can actually help you get into those meditative and trance-like states, which is great for raising energy and powering spells and performing magic. So another just really simple exercise, which I do a lot of the times if I'm doing magic in like a pinch, is the rubbing the hands technique. So this is something which I did actually get, I think, from Psychic Witch, and that concept of like, if you rub your hands and then raise your energy and such and really like focus in on this movement and then like pull your hands apart, you can almost like feel some tension there, like that's energy there that you're directing into your hands here, and obviously you can move it about and then you can get rid of it. But it's that type of thing, so you can rub your hands, you can raise that energy, you can feel it there, and you can push that into the spell. Obviously, what I tend to do with this is I rub my hands usually, I do my visualization, honing on those feelings, really raise that specific energy for what I want to achieve and push that into obviously the spell, which I've also performed. So it's things like incorporating all those different techniques. That's what I personally do. But you know, if you want to focus in on one specific technique, then that still works fine, you know. That's okay, you don't need to visualize. So you can rub your hands, focus on your goal, and just push it into your spell object, and that's what you can do. It is still effective. Another technique which I think really complements the other techniques I've given is the concept of incantations, or what people call mantras. The power of repetition, affirmations, and repeating certain words or phrases is really, really powerful. As well, if you're able to sort of repeat a specific, you know, obviously the words or phrases related to your goal which you're trying to achieve, if you're repeating it over and over in like a rhythm, then that can really help you again get into that state you desire, and that can work just as effectively in terms of raising your energy and building up that power to power your spell. Chants and incantations is really, really good. It doesn't just necessarily have to be like repeating rhymes or like a word repeated over and over and over. Like incantations are something which have existed in folklore and just general witch lore in different cultures just for ages, and a really good book which demonstrates the power of incantations is this book by Roger J. Horn, The Witch's Art of Incantations, Spoken Charms, Spells and Curses in Folk Witchcraft. I did a review of this for patrons and I go into a bit more on depth in there, but he just goes through a bunch of conjurations, incantations and chants, just charms basically for different types of spells. Really, really good book and really handy. You can use incantations and chants and all those sorts of spoken word charms to power your spell if you really just focus in on the words and say it with meaning. You know, if you're able to get into that state, get into that like zone and focus in on the words you're saying and say it with power, say it with, you know, a firm stance, then I think that can really be powerful in terms of powering your magic. I think incantations as well are really good when we're getting into the spirit model and working with spirits to power your magic, but again, I'll do a different separate video on that. So yeah, those are just some alternatives to visualization when it comes to personal practices, but other things which also power spell objects are like charging via external sources. So obviously a very popular one is like charging via the sun or charging via the moon. A lot of people do this when charging specific waters or maybe charging crystals, but I just want to note that certain crystals can be damaged by the sun. For example, a lot of coloured quartzes can fade in sunlight, such as amethyst, and a lot of the heat treated ones will fade in sunlight with prolonged exposure, so just be careful with things like that. But yes, a lot of people charge spell objects via those like planetary energies, and obviously this doesn't have to be the sun and moon. You can do this through other planetary energy and planetary spirits that you can work with, and planetary magic is a whole video that I should probably dedicate to, but that is something which you can almost charge your spells with, aligned to a specific planetary energy. A lot of people charge by flame. For example, a very popular one is like charging with a candle, and if you have like a spell jar, you can pop your candle on top of your spell object and let the candle burn all the way down. I think ultimately it really just depends on your worldview and almost like how you think things work, so your like philosophy. But a lot of people use practices like charging by candle, and if that works for you, then obviously that's fine. But another very popular one is the burial method, so charging by the earth. And you know how I feel about burying stuff in the earth. I don't particularly like it, and I don't really recommend it here on this channel, but a lot of people do it. So the advice I would give if you had to bury an object is burying it in your own back garden or your yard, somewhere which is not wild land or near wildlife or any protected sites specifically. I think your own garden or like a big plant pot you have full of soil is a perfect way to charge things by burial and by the earth without really costing the environment that much. Whatever you do in your garden is your business, but a plant pot obviously is just a plant pot, and really actually eco-friendly in the sense that, you know, you can charge it in the plant pot. You could have like a designated magical plant pot just for charging objects, and once you feel that it's adequately charged enough, or a lot of people use this for cleansing as well, to cleanse, like for the earth to absorb all of those like negative energies or whatever is inflicted on the object. Once it's done its job, you could take it out and refresh the soil in whichever way you want, whether it be getting new soil or just like shaking up the soil or watering it or whatever. So it's definitely something which is a bit more like reusable and sustainable in that sense. So that is the tip I would give if you wanted to charge things by burial. So yeah, that's it for today's video. I wanted it to be short and sweet because we're still in a heat wave here in the UK and it's very, very hot. And I wanted to open up, you know, let me know in the comments, how do you usually charge your spells? What tips do you have for people who maybe can't visualize, and what alternatives would you personally give? Let everyone know down in the comments so we can all help each other out. So I look forward to seeing your replies. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you guys being here. We're nearly at 10k, which is so exciting. Thank you so much for being here. And let me know what videos you want to see from me next down below as well. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.